One bike completely changed the entire small capacity adventure bike market. And even with the impact it had, it was more or less a half-assed design that was thrown up against the wall to see if it would stick. And it did, and because of that, it changed everything. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. The small capacity adventure bike market is absolutely exploding in ways that I never could have imagined would have happened 4 or 5 years ago. We no longer have to take an enduro bike or a street bike and do major modifications to it to take it out on those long distance touring adventures, BDR rides. There are a number of really fantastic, ready off the showroom floor, small capacity bikes. For example, we have the CF Moto 450 Ibex or 450 MT that has long travel suspension, a larger tank, electronics, tubeless wheeled tires and wheel combination, and as well, very competitively priced. Royal Enfield completely designed their Himalayan line, creating the 450 with a completely redesigned chassis, a liquid cooled engine, new electronics, improved suspension, and it also is competitively priced in the small capacity adventure bike market. KTM completely redesigned their 390 line of bikes, and especially in the off-road market, to be performance built machines, creating 3 lines out of what will be the 390 SMC, the 390 Enduro, and the 390 Adventure R, redefining what small capacity bikes are capable of doing. BMW has also jumped on the high performance small capacity adventure bike with their 450 GS concept. And from what I'm reading, it is likely going to be released in fall of 2025. And not to be outdone, Aprilia also is working on the Touareg 457, which is another small capacity adventure bike that will likely also be a high performance bike. What a great time to be looking and riding small capacity adventure bikes. Now, how did we get to the point where we have so many options in small capacity adventure bikes? Well, it comes down to one particular bike, and that is the KTM 390 Adventure, which from an engineering standpoint, it had its flaws and really appeared to be more of the love child of the KTM Duke 390 and the KTM 790 Adventure, maybe even the Adventure R. Those two coming together to create the 390 Adventure. Whether you love or hate this bike, the KTM 390 Adventure, it is undeniable that this bike has been a worldwide success. And I can speak just from what I have seen in North America, from riding one myself, all of the comments that I get from other riders riding this bike, and also more importantly, how many I have seen from coast to coast. When I was riding in California, I saw people running around on 390 Adventures. When I was out on the East Coast, I saw people riding BDRs on 390 Adventures. And even this last summer, I ran into a guy riding the KTM 390 Adventure up Moki Dugway through parts of Utah. So they are everywhere. And if you take a look at all of the content that's been created on this bike, it is worldwide. It has been a success. So even with the success it's had, if you look at this bike on paper, it is clearly more than the sum of its parts and has exceeded where maybe it really shouldn't have. So I want to talk about where the failures were, why it was really just thrown together, but how it has succeeded as a fantastic small adventure bike that has led to this great new market that we are in now. Here's a few of the things that I'm talking about when I say it was kind of a half-assed design and not really fully thought of as an adventure bike. One is the foot pegs. This chassis comes from the Duke, and so the foot pegs were canted forward a little, which was initially fine for me, but then became a huge irritation. And I think anyone who has spent any time riding this bike likely has changed out those foot pegs. And then the skid plate that came with the bike mounted directly to the engine, and there is no bike that should carry the label as an adventure bike should ever have a skid plate mounted directly to the engine. So there's been a lot of aftermarket parts for that. So those are some of the reasons why I say this was just kind of thrown together to see what would happen without a lot of effort. I know that it came with cast wheels, which frustrated a lot of riders that wanted to ride off-road, and it was also a 19-inch front wheel, where the new KTM 390 Adventure is a 21-inch front wheel. So again, I think this was just throwing it together, see what would happen, see how successful it was going to be. It was very successful and prompted KTM to do a full redesign of this bike. This bike came with 1-inch handlebars, which is a non-standard size. It's not a 7/8 and it's not an 1 1/8. So I changed the bars. The other thing that was part of that design is they were very road-oriented handlebars with a big sweep on it, so it wasn't really adventurized or ready for off-road type riding. The other thing was the ground clearance on this bike, because it didn't have exceptionally long travel suspension and was running a 1917 wheel combo, is there wasn't a lot of ground clearance. And with additional skid plates that gated off the engine, you just didn't have it. But that did not prevent anyone from taking these bikes out and beating the tar out of them, because they could take it. I almost forgot one of the most irritating issues with this bike. And when the first few model years came out, it would not hold its traction control if you stalled the bike or if you turned it off and turned it back on, which really was a huge irritation. They eventually fixed that in later models, but to me, that was just lazy programming. They didn't care, even though they ended up fixing it later. So then the question becomes, how did this bike succeed? So if you look at it, just strictly starting from the horsepower, this has 43 horsepower. And all of the other small capacity adventure bikes or anything that was going to be converted was much lower in horsepower. The Himalayan 411, which has been a very popular bike, it's around 23 horsepower and weighing over 400 pounds. The CRF 300L Rally, which has also been a very popular bike, again, it's low 22, 23 horsepower, where this bike with the higher horsepower, it could hit the roads. You could do interstate riding if you had to get where you wanted to be. You could do it comfortably and maintain interstate speeds. So the horsepower out of this small capacity bike really set itself apart from the others. Even the BMW G310 GS was only around low 30, 32 horsepower. And I have ridden that engine and I've ridden this engine. It is a significant difference. Now, I know some of you out there are thinking, well, what about the DRs and the KLRs and how they were used? Those bikes, they are utilitarian, very functional, but as far as the interstate side of things, a 5-speed transmission, I've had a KLR, it was miserable. Long distance travel, I know people do it, but they're doing it at a very slow pace, where this out here in the West, places where we have wide open spaces, this did something no other bike did, and why it really changed the small capacity market. A couple of the other areas where this bike set itself apart from the others was the suspension. If you look at the other bikes that are similar to this, fully adjustable suspension, had a bit more travel than some of the other bikes, or didn't have quite as much as like the 300, the CRF 300 Rally, but was better tuned for road riding. So it maintained its road capabilities while still giving some off-road ability. Now, the other thing that this thing did is it was lightweight, 375 pounds or so wet, maybe 380, I don't remember the exact number, but I know many, many riders that were coming off of the middleweight bikes, and especially the leader capacity bikes, the 1000cc or more, where those bikes are 480, 500, 550, and coming to this bike just opened up a whole new world of riding for those riders that were on those big bikes, that maybe their pucker factor riding them off-road was really, really high, where this bike has given people confidence and they're not afraid to drop it because they know they can pick it up. So it really changed and opened up the riding for so many riders. And I have seen so many comments on my videos on how people have gotten rid of the big bikes and have gotten back out riding BDRs, riding off-road, and enjoying riding again because of what this bike did for them. Now, I've talked a lot about the bike and what it has done. I think probably the biggest impact that this bike has done, it has shown bike manufacturers, it has shown the industry, the adventure market, that there is a desire to ride small capacity adventure bikes. I don't know how else to explain all of the new bikes that are coming out, because it was only 4 or 5 years ago where the manufacturers were focusing on those middleweight bikes, 700 to 900 cc's, and putting all of their R&D efforts and trying to make performance focused bikes in that area. And now you see it exploding here. And I can't help but think that if you really look at what this bike has done to the small capacity adventure market and how many people have flocked to these small bikes, that it has had an impact. Manufacturers have looked at this bike because they can make these at a lower price point to get more people in to riding bikes and introduce them to the awesomeness of adventure bike riding. So the next time you throw your leg over one of these small capacity adventure bikes, especially these new ones, the CF Moto Ibex 450, the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, and the soon to be out BMW 450, and then also hopefully when I get an opportunity, the Touareg 457. And then of course, you can't forget that the KTM 390 Adventure R, the Enduro, and the SMC are eminently going to be out on the trails and roads. So when you do throw your leg over those, maybe just take a second and recognize that it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this bike. So if you have a small capacity adventure bike, or you're thinking about going to one, let me know in the comments which bike you're riding and what your experience has been. If you have a KTM 390 Adventure, let me know what your experience has been, why you wanted this bike, and if it has opened up the riding like so many other people have said it has for them. And then the last thing is, if you are looking to get one of these small capacity bikes, which one are you looking for, and why is it it's driving you in that direction? So the last thing I'll say is, remember, you can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. So get out and do that ride you're thinking about. Maybe go buy that adventure bike that you're interested in to get out and experience life. Thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there.
Test.